All right, once again, good afternoon, sirs and ma'ams. We now arrive at our final panel for today, and I know everyone is excited to go home since it's Friday, and yeah, the traffic here in Manila, Philippines is tragic. All right, and now for chairing this panel is Dr. Raman Yacob, Research Fellow at the Lowy Institute. Joining him are Rear Admiral Samuel Cohas, Executive Secretary, Indonesia Coast Guard, Bakamla, Commodore J. Tariela, Chief West Philippine Sea Transparency Group from the Philippine Coast Guard, and Lieutenant Colonel Luen Vun Nguyen, Deputy Commander, Reconnaissance Unit Number 1, Vietnam Coast Guard. Let's give them a round of applause.
And welcome everyone. Welcome, sirs and madam, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I think it is my honor today to welcome you to today's distinguished panel discussion featuring senior leaders from the Coast Guard of Indonesia, the Philippines, and Vietnam's Defense Ministry. Representing three vital maritime nations in Southeast Asia, I believe these panelists will bring with them deep expertise or personal insight to regional security and cooperation at sea. I think before I proceed further, I would also like to thank Dr. Jeffrey or Daniel and the organizer for intelligently putting the Coast Guard in the last panel. I think it's the most exciting and colorful, given what happened yesterday in the Philippine Sea between the Chinese Coast Guard and the Philippines vessels. Yeah. So going forward, the Coast Guard in Southeast Asia, in ASEAN, play a critical role in the security and safety of regional waters. They cooperate closely. They also cooperate closely with the Chinese Coast Guard. Sometimes the physical cooperation is too much. Sometimes it's too wet for some Coast Guard. And of course, they have been damaged during that interaction. But going forward, we look forward to a rich and engaging dialogue on Southeast Asia maritime domains. And I would like to start first at the strategic level. I think the first questions that I would like to ask individual panelists is this. What is the most important strategic issue that your Coast Guard is facing currently? So maybe we'll start with Kuas first, then we proceed to the Vietnamese panelists. Yeah, Pa first.
Thank you, Pa Rahman. Very good afternoon to you all. First and foremost, I would like to thank the host, in this case, WPS, and the Philippine Coast Guard for inviting us, and let me be the one of the speaker among this prominent audience today. I know that not just me, but the three of us are standing between you and your flight home, and I know that some of you are lawyers, so I will try to be concise with my statement. I think what is the most strategic thing that have to be faced by not just Indonesia and not just the Indonesian Coast Guard, but the Coast Guard, the Navy, and the maritime law enforcement agencies in Indonesia and in this region is actually quite the same, that we have to deal with a lot of problems from the level of petty crimes to things that can actually start war if we cannot manage it with the right approach. In this case, back home, Indonesian Coast Guard, in this case Bakamla RI, we tried to strengthen our organization, our institution, the regulation as well, the national regulation, not just applicable to the Coast Guard itself, but to the maritime security as a whole. And we also try to strengthen the integration, the cooperation between our institutions, not just in Indonesia, but also among other Coast Guard, uh, including the maritime law enforcement agencies, especially in the region, in this case, ASEAN. I think that's the thing that you asked. Thank you.
Thank you, Pa. And for Colonel Khan, what is from your positions, what do you see is the most strategic challenge that the Vietnamese Coast Guard is facing now?
Yeah, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. First, I would like to convey my thanks to the WPS for inviting me to join the very important dialogue. And the theme of the dialogue, I think, is very practical, and also we can, together to sit here to talk about the very important issue that is maritime security, which is very important for Southeast Asian countries, and also for Vietnam, because we have 3,200 kilometers border, the Coast Guard, the coast law line. So the Coast Guard is very important for Vietnam to protect the sovereignty, sovereign rights, and also jurisdiction. And if we compare the Coast Guard with other forces in the VPA, the Coast Guard is one of the among the youngest forces. It was established in 1998, and now maybe if you compare the Coast Guard, the Vietnam Coast Guard, with the other countries in ASEAN, maybe we lack a lot of experience. So we have to. It's a good chance for Vietnam, to cooperate with the ASEAN, Coast Guard, to learn from you, and also to build our capability. And for the mission and task of the Vietnam Coast Guard is to, you see that we have 4 layers to protect the sea. The first one is inland and coast. We have the force to protect the inland and coast. And for the territorial water, that is 12 nautical miles, that is the task of the border guard. And near the border guard is the Coast Guard. And from the Coast Guard is the Navy. So that means we have four forces combined together to protect the sea. So the mission of the Coast Guard in Vietnam is to protect the sovereignty, the sovereign rights and jurisdiction, and also combating, against the criminals like the drug trafficking, human trafficking, and also protect the fishermen, and at sea, and to protect the production activities at sea in Vietnam. So, in summary, that the Coast Guard is very, very important for us.
Thank you. And now I'm moving towards Commodore J. So I think Philippines is a bit unique because of what it is facing now. So correct me if I'm wrong. I think the strategic challenge that the Philippines Coast Guard is facing is disinformation campaign against Philippines' interests. Do you think that is true?
Thank you, Ryan. Before I respond to the question about the strategic challenges that the Philippine Coast Guard is currently facing, I think it's important for us to start. What are the strategic opportunities that the Philippine Coast Guard is providing our current administration? And I think these strategic opportunities are also pretty much the same with how the Indonesian Coast Guard, Malaysian Coast Guard, and even Vietnam Coast Guard are being utilized by their own government. First of all, Coast Guard organizations in the Southeast Asia, not just for the Philippine Coast Guard, is basically mandated to carry out maritime governance. So this is completely different with that of the armed force, the military or the Philippine Navy. When you speak of maritime governance, these are basically constabulary roles. It is related to maritime safety, marine environmental protection, and even maritime law enforcement. So this is the first strategic opportunity that we provide our own government, and it allows us to collaborate and cooperate with other Coast Guard organizations in different countries in Southeast Asia. We believe that Coast Guard cooperation is pretty much easier because these functions that we perform serve the interests of all nations. For example, in countering illegal fishing, addressing narco trafficking, or even illegal smuggling and human trafficking. This allow, for example, the Philippines and Indonesia and Malaysia to counter piracy as well, for example. So through maritime governance that we are currently performing, there are more possibilities of cooperation. And then the most important that the Coast Guard vessels are performing in the entire South China Sea is that, of course, it de-escalates the tension. We all believe, as Coast Guard personnel, that the White House that we are deploying the South China Sea does not send an escalation signal or a provocative action towards any other state actors, may it be with China or any other claimant states in the South China Sea. So in responding to your question, what are the strategic challenges that we have right now? Well, first of all, that is the violation of the People's Republic of China in encroaching within our own exclusive economic zone, particularly in the West Philippine Sea. And it's not just their encroachment, but rather it is also worth mentioning about their illegal aggression and even the harassment of the ordinary Filipino fishermen. These are the challenges not the Philippines are just facing, but even Indonesia, Malaysia, and Vietnam are also have to address. And in addition to those aggressive actions of the People's Republic of China in the entire South China Sea, as you said, disinformation is one of our greatest challenges that we face, not just at sea, but even to our domestic level. Thank you.
Thank you, Commodore. As a follow-up question, anyway, I think early on in the opening statements for this event, Dr. Daniel actually mentioned I should not, or we should avoid using technical terms, but he didn't mention that we should avoid tough questions. So I'm going to ask a bit provocative. So you mentioned the West Philippine Sea, but I think to my understanding too that China may be interested to exert dominance in the Luzon Strait, because if it seeks to control or to invade Taiwan successfully, control of the Luzon Strait will be quite important. So in your capacity, have you seen any increased Chinese engagement, presence in that area, and whether the Philippines Coast Guard will strengthen its focus in that area? Thank you.
Well, as you can probably Google through open source, our focus now in Luzon Strait are, of course, the persistent presence of the Chinese research vessel. The Philippine government has never, has never hesitated to publicize all of this. Since the start of the year, we have documented the presence of the Chinese research vessels in Luzon Strait. So right now, for the Philippine Coast Guard, besides from the fact that we are monitoring, documenting, and also driving them away, that is another concern for us in Luzon Strait, because the Chinese research vessels most of the time are conducting illegal marine scientific research within our own exclusive economic zone that is not permitted by the Philippine government.
Thank you very much. So when I look through all the three answers, the word cooperation has been regularly emphasized. And my next question is this: what is the state of ASEAN Coast Guard cooperations now? And do you think how best can the ASEAN Coast Guard Forum, for example, be used to be an effective regional forum to address maritime challenges? Maybe I will give one example. I think I understand that there has been a discussion about rules of engagement among the ASEAN Coast Guard. Do you think ASEAN Coast Guard can come to an agreement to engage each other in a peaceful manner, which means we do not water cannon each other, for example, and that would provide a good example to external power engaging us. So maybe I start first with Pak Kuas first.
Thank you, Pak Rahman. I think the evolution of the cooperation between Coast Guard and maritime law enforcement agencies in Southeast Asia, in particular, stand as tangible evidence actually of the effectiveness of the ASEAN principle. Why do I say this? Because the principal challenge actually in establishing the ASEAN Coast Guard Forum lies in the divergent understanding, perspective of the ASEAN member states on maritime security. And this is not an easy task. I think many of us already aware that even experts like Professor Geoffrey Thiel or Dr. Christian Burger or maybe Ms. Azura over there and Colin, if he's still here, still struggling to find the right definition for maritime security. So in the context of that, the ASEAN Coast Guard Forum, when we tried to establish it in 2022 to invite all the head of the ASEAN Coast Guard at that time, we never thought that the pace or the speed of the meeting to find common ground for us would be so quick. Next week, actually, we will hold a technical expert group meeting in Bogor, Jakarta. At the moment, the chairman of the ASEAN Coast Guard Forum is the Philippine Coast Guard, but the technical expert group meeting will be done on the 28th of May, and all the 10 delegates from 10 member states of ASEAN will be there as well. And I think it's a very great achievement that all 10 already have the feeling that they need to be there, right? So for me, I'm really optimistic that this is the indicators that show that the ASEAN Coast Guard and the maritime law enforcement agencies in the South Asia, we want to work together. And actually, even while we are trying to finish the term of reference and concept paper, we actually already start doing some activities. For example, we already held regular morning briefs. It's for information sharing between Southeast Asia Coast Guard, ASEAN Coast Guard, and the MLEA, right? And we also already perform joint exercise between ASEAN Coast Guard, and we also send our people, not just the high level, but also the middle level officials in exchange of visit, and the patrol vessel as well. For example, Indonesia already sent our vessels to the Philippines, to Vietnam, to Malaysia, to Singapore, and in turn, the Philippine, the Malaysian Coast Guard vessel already visit Indonesia, and in the very near future, Singapore Police Coast Guard vessel also will visit Indonesia. So the kind of interactions that has been done, even though the ACF is not formally yet established as the technical bodies of ASEAN, but we already done a lot of activities together.
Okay, it looks good, promising, and I think there are some quarters within ASEAN that when they are comparing between the ASEAN Coast Guard Forum and the COC negotiation. The COC negotiation is a bit slow, so there were some quarters that actually suggested the ASEAN Coast Guard Forum could be used as a negotiation point between the different ASEAN Coast Guard forces to find common ground in engaging each other. Do you think that may work? Can the ASEAN Coast Guard Forum work hand in hand or in parallel with the COC negotiation? What do you think from the Vietnamese perspective? Do you think can ASEAN Coast Guard Forum actually come up with a code of conduct within the ASEAN forces themselves?
Yes, I think that for the COC, I think it's a very difficult, very difficult problem. For you know that for the DOC, it takes about 10 years to negotiate, and then the DOC, was born in 2002, and from that we continue the discussing on COC. But I think, for the COC process, we still have some difficulties. First among ASEAN states, about the areas of application, and also about the sovereignties and sovereign rights, and also between the ASEAN member state and also China. And I think that the difference is now too far, from each other. So that if we wish the COC come into effect or come into the result or something like that. But I think it takes time for this ASEAN and China to build COC, because we have a lot of difficulties to have to be resolved. Yeah.
So, going forward to Commodore J, do you think the ASEAN Coast Guard Forum actually can be used to find a common ground in terms of how ASEAN Coast Guard engage each other, and using, if there is an agreement, ASEAN then can tell China, look, among ourselves, we have this agreement, so you have to comply with us. Do you think that may work?
This is my wish. This is my wish, That is, the ASEAN Coast Guard should have an agreement first. Because if you want to do something with outside, you must be strong. You must be strong yourself first. That means among ASEAN Coast Guard, we have to unite, with each other, and then by this agreement, cooperation, for example. Yeah.
So, Commodore J, what is your view about that?
Well, first of all, even there is no existing rules of engagement among Coast Guard in Southeast Asia. For example, with that of Bakamla or MMEA or Vietnam Coast Guard, every time the Philippine Coast Guard would pass through in those areas that are occupied by Vietnam Coast Guard, or even with that of the MMEA, we don't usually carry out actions that are unlawful or aggressive. We don't do water cannoning. We don't attempt to ram each other. As ASEAN Coast Guard, I think we have our own understanding that this kind of actions are not something that is acceptable. We know how to respect each other, even if we are passing through contested area in the South China Sea. At the same time, the Philippine Coast Guard also know how to treat fairly and humanely the fishermen from Malaysia, Indonesia, or even Vietnam. In return, your Coast Guards are also doing the same thing to our Filipino fishermen. It's only the People's Republic of China who's conducting harassment and bullying and coming out with the violation of collision regulation and even using water cannon against our vessel. So, in the absence of any existing document that would strengthen the ASEAN Coast Guard Forum, I think among Southeast Asians, we know how to behave properly, and we know how to recognize each other as a law enforcement agency. But just to go back to your question, whether the ASEAN Coast Guard Forum can be an agency wherein we can support one another in suppressing Chinese aggressive action. I don't think that among Southeast Asians, particularly during ASEAN Coast Guard Forum, we don't discuss about China threat. In ASEAN Coast Guard Forum, we only talk about the regional interests that talks and concerns about our own functions, whether it's search and rescue or combating IUUF or doing maritime law enforcement. Among other Asian Coast Guards, that is having China as an issue or an agenda in those forums so far has never been that, very popular.
Thank you very much. I'm not going into a specific country, issues that related to your specific country per se. So in the case of Indonesia, there have been reports that actually President Prabowo has reduced the budget allocated to Bakamla from about 66 million US dollars to about 44 million US dollars. That's quite a lot. So with more than 17,000 islands to secure, how does Bakamla cope with its missions to safeguard Indonesian maritime interests with a limited budget?
Yeah, thank you. For Bakamla, the budget cut is accepted by us as our effort, national effort, right, to focus on more important things. Of course, all of the tasks that must be taken by Coast Guard are important. But what we have done so far is we try to focus on matters that cannot be, for example, delayed, because usually it's not new. You know, this budget cut already been done for the past 5, even more than that. And usually in the middle or middle of the year, then there will be some relaxation. So what we have done is we prioritize the operational aspect of it, of the budget. So it will not jeopardize our maritime law enforcement missions, right? And then we work more with other agencies in Indonesia, and we have the Navy that and other maritime law enforcement agencies that we can work together. We can do, you know, the shift, right? Who's going to be there, and in what period of time. And at the moment, we also, the system is already there, our national surveillance system, but now we rely more on our surveillance and reconnaissance system to back up our operations. And with the information that we got from our fusion center, we will share it to other institutions as well. So I don't think the budget cut affect us so significantly at the moment. Thank you.
Now, going forward to Vietnam, Vietnam is a very interesting case. There was a report by the Center for Strategic and International Studies in 2021. It mentioned that Vietnam have begun expanding some of its small and medium-sized outposts in the Spratly Islands. About 2,200 acres of new land has been created across 10 features, 8 new harbors, and 1 new airstrip. I think what's interesting is this. China has not taken a hardline stance against Vietnam, unlike, against the Philippines, for example. So, are you able to share your magic formula in dealing with China? How you soften the Chinese?
Thank you. It's a very interesting question. And also, it's the first time I hear about the data from CRIS. I'm not sure. It's first time for me to so I have, maybe I will come back to my home and have time to study again about the data you give, that about 2,200 acres for new land in the Spratly Islands, you mean? I think that, I myself, have been working as in strategic studies, and I have the study tours over, in Spratly Island 3 times. I have been there 3 times. And you know that the weather and climate in the Spratly Island areas is very, very harsh. Due to the climate change, the water level is rising and also make the land eroded, So that's why our island, the island Vietnam, occupy there is becoming small and small. So that before that, in front, to recover that, we have to build the dikes and to be reinforced to prevent the erosion of the land, to protect the people living there, to protect the fishermen over there. Because in the island, in some islands, we have the people living, and also the school for children to study there, and also the pagodas and other things. So that's why we have to protect them, and this is our purpose. But I'm not sure that we can have 2,200 acres of new land.
Yep. But as a follow-up question, so far Vietnam and China relations over the South China Sea is quite calm. So is there anything special that the Vietnamese are doing with the Chinese to deal with the Chinese?
For this, you know that maybe it takes me a long time to explain for you, you know. Vietnam and China have a very long history. You know, we have, you know, lived together with a big neighbor for 4,000 years. And our ancestors also know how to live with the big neighbors. And now the government, the present government also follows our advisor, the advices of our ancestors. China is a big country. So don't do something that they feel lose face. And in Vietnam saying we also have, don't trouble the trouble till the trouble troubles you. That is, I think that is very important for the policy, the diplomatic policy, how to live with you know, with big neighbors. And for Vietnam, we have, you know, relationship with China. The relationship between Vietnam and China is quite good, I can say. It's quite good, except the South China Sea issue. I mean that in politically, economically, you know, militarily and other things, very good, except the South China Sea. And now we have, you know, we have the party diplomacy, state diplomacy, you know, and people-to-people diplomacy with China. So that's why we promote the whole, you know, diplomacy with China. When something happens, we promote the whole strength of, you know, any kinds of types of diplomacy to resolve the problems.
Thank you. Now going forward to Commodore J, in the case of the Philippines, basically Manila has received many foreign assistance from other powers. For example, this year, Australia has donated drones to the Philippines Coast Guard. Japan is providing about 12 vessels of over 250 tons. And we have about 40 vessels from the French government, to my understanding. So my question is this: is there a danger that with too many overlapping partnerships, it may dilute actually your strategic focus and also create dependency? And also, how do you prioritize these engagements? Thank you.
Well, obviously, the Philippines, next to Indonesia, is a very big archipelagic country. This is the reason why we are currently prioritizing acquisition of more Coast Guard vessels. And as you said, thanks to Japan and Australia, since we're going to receive more Coast Guard assets in the next coming years. If the question is, with that increasing tremendously the number of Coast Guard vessels in the next coming years, how can the Philippine Coast Guard strategically man all these assets? I think the Philippine Coast Guard started by increasing the number of personnel even before the assets were delivered. 9 years ago, in 2016, the Philippine Coast Guard only has a manning of 8,900. And we came up with a proposal increasing the Coast Guard to as many as 37,869. This year, the Philippine Coast Guard number of personnel is now 34,000. We are now even bigger than that of the Philippine Navy and Philippine Marines combined. We have prepared our personnel for the coming of the next, in the next year, the Coast Guard vessels coming from Japan and even in France. So I don't think that the demand for the number of competency as well and the number of personnel that we're going to bring on board our Coast Guard assets will be shortened because of these assets in the next coming years. We have strategically managed and had a foresight that this will happen as it, you know, as we have been receiving support from these foreign countries.
So before I open to the floor to raise the questions, I would like to ask the last questions. I will start with Commodore J first. Looking at the future of the Philippines Coast Guard, what is your visions for the future for the Philippines Coast Guard? And do you think there is a place for middle powers such as Australia, Japan, and of course EU? Can they play a role or contribute to your vision?
Well, As a Coast Guard officer, although I'm not the commandant of the Philippine Coast Guard, I know that this question would perfectly fit in for our commandant as how he sees the Coast Guard in the next coming years. But
As a senator also?
But as a Coast Guard personnel, I really envision having a regional Coast Guard in Southeast Asia who are there to push for maritime governance. That it's not just setting aside their differences about their territorial dispute, but we engage one another in support of our own national interests, whether it's in countering piracy or ensuring safe trade routes for those vessels that are passing there, and even promoting safety of life and property at sea and protecting the marine environment. Technically, the Coast Guard function is all about humanitarian and supporting these constabulary roles. We're not actually there to engage in war, be engaged in armed conflict, and be the reason of escalation. So that is how I see the Coast Guard will develop in the next coming years. Regarding your question as to how the United States, the middle powers like Australia, Japan, and even South Korea can support this realization of dream, I think if you're going to look at the Australian Maritime Border Force of Australia and the Coast Guards of South Korea and Japan, they also share the common mandates of the Coast Guard in Southeast Asia, also promoting safety, protecting the marine environment, and enforcing maritime laws. If all these middle powers will support the capability of Malaysia, Indonesia, Vietnam, and the Philippines, and share their own understanding of how international law can be enforced at sea, I think definitely these countries would really support and accelerate my vision of having a Coast Guard that is cooperating in promoting a rules-based order.
Thank you, Commodore. And to my Vietnamese panelists, so beside the magic formula with the Chinese-Vietnamese relations, what is your vision for the Vietnamese Coast Guard in the future?
I think it's a very important issue because, as I said before, we must be strong first. That means the Coast Guard must be strong. And the capability building is very important for every Coast Guard. And of course, we advocate to mobilize the domestic issue or domestic resources, but we also need the support from outside. So for Vietnam, we always advocate the resilience and also strategic autonomy. That means we have to rely first on ourselves, and then we also take advantage of the outside help. This is a very important and very good way for building the Coast Guard. And you know that especially now we are living in the fourth industrial revolution, and also in the modern times, we also need the expertise, the personal training, and also the equipment, especially the new technology like artificial intelligence in developing the capability or in building the capability of the Coast Guard. And also we always welcome the support and the help or assistance from other countries, including Australia, including the US and India, South Korea and Japan. And also in Vietnam we have the Center for English Training for the sailors, for the officers and soldiers from the Coast Guard. And also we combine the visit for the port call with the foreign vessels to come and also to train the HADR and also the queues, as exercise, for example. And this is, I think, the good way for us to increase our capability.
Thank you. Pak Kwas, just questions regarding the visions for the Bakamla. So do you think the Indonesians' non-alignment, bebas and active, will have an impact on Bakamla visions? Because if you want to receive assistance from the US or major power, whether bebas and active policy, does it have impact on your engagement with foreign partner? And also your vision for Bakamla?
I don't think so. We have been cooperating with a lot of countries, right? Because I think in Indonesia case, not just now, in forums before, we always state that we believe that maritime security issues is not a small thing, it's not an easy thing to do, but at the same time, we also understand that the sea is very important to us, and not just to us, Indonesia. I think it's very important to all the nations in the region and even to the whole world. And to do that, we cannot do it in isolation. We have to work together with other countries, and so we open our doors if other countries want to assist us in doing or in maintaining the peace and stability in the region, especially in maintaining our seas. And we have received a lot of proposals from other friendly countries, from Japan. Actually, a patrol vessel is being built as we speak now. And then we also work closely with other countries. For the ACF, for example, Japan and some other countries also already shown their intention to support the activities. But for the ACF, we try to not to accept for the moment, because at the moment we are still establishing or formulating the concept paper, the TOR, so we don't want any other countries, especially from out of this region, to influence us in defining what we want to be written in the term of reference and the concept paper. We also work with international organization, UNODC, work very closely to us. Then they have been assisting us in a lot of.
I see.
Yeah.
The UN Antogo is smiling there.
Yes, they have been helping us a lot with all of the activities, including ACF. For them, is an exception because we thought, they're using the UN flag, so we thought it's okay for them to be there. So I think it will not change the character of Indonesia to stay or to remain as a non-block country.
Okay.
And it won't affect our international policy.
Thank you, Pak. So now I will open to the floor. I think we have about 15 to 20 minutes for the participants to ask questions. I think we start from here to there. Sir, I think I will ask one question at a time.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you to our panelists. So I have one question to address to Commodore J. Tariela. So basically, the Philippine Coast Guard has had a very interesting history. So it was initially in the Department of National Defense, and then for sure, Commodore Tariela knows this, that in 1998, it was first transferred to the Office of the President before eventually being transferred to the Department of Transportation and Communication, now basically just the Department of Transportation. So with all the changes in the strategic environment and the challenges that our Coast Guards are facing in the South China Sea, I'd like to get the insights of Commodore Jay, if he thinks it is about time already for the Philippine Coast Guard to make some organizational modifications regarding the department under which it falls into, maybe related to easier flow of communications, or basically maybe to help in synchronizing efforts related to our maritime interests. So what are your organizational insights? How do you see this long-term happening? So that's it. Thank you.
It's very tough for me to comment on that because I'm still an active Coast Guard officer. I don't want my supervising department to raise their eyebrow as I deliver how I see where the Coast Guard perfectly fits. But as a Coast Guard officer, I would like to respond to that. I think, as I said, the Philippine Coast Guard has different functions. the Coast Guard from the history, starting from the United States, basically the reason why it was placed under the Department of Transportation was because the intention was for maritime safety. Right after we were taken away from that of the Philippine Navy as a subunit of the Philippine Navy when it was created in 1967, the objective was to professionalize the domestic shipping industry. From 1980s to 90s, we have seen a lot of maritime incidents that happened that prompted the then President Ferdinand B. Ramos to transfer the Coast Guard to the Department of Transportation. Primarily because the objective then and the organizational mandate of the Coast Guard is more on transportation, and that is maritime safety. And then it has changed eventually, as we see from merely being the agency covering maritime safety, navigation safety, search and rescue. The Coast Guard right now is more seen as an agency of the government in asserting our position in the West Philippine Sea. Does it merit a transfer to the Department of National Defense or to the Office of the President or to whatever department? It's up to the current Commander-in-Chief how he sees that. But I would still comment that right now, our current placement under the Department of Transportation allows us to still stick with our mandate in supporting maritime safety, conducting maritime law enforcement, and protecting the marine environment.
Thank you. I will go to this side first for the first, I think, Sue, is it? Sue? And followed by Charisma later on. So we have two questions at the same time. I will go back to this side.
Thank you. I have very quick two questions. The first question is on the formalization of ASEAN Coast Guard Forum. So I would like to know the progress of the formalization of the ACF, and would it be finalized by next meeting in June 2025, which is supposed to be the next ACF? And then the next question is that now the Coast Guards organizations in different ASEAN countries have different structures. Some are under Ministry of Transport, Ministry of Defense, and some under Ministry of Home Affairs or Defense. So do you have any challenges or difficulties? Would it be a challenge in formalizing ACF? And the next is getting the funding, for example, to buy petrol boats and all. Is there any challenge in your respective country? Thank you.
Charisma?
Wafa Charisma from CSIS Indonesia. So my question is to my own Bakamla, Samuel. So Bakamla is in the front line of facing incursions of ships from different countries, including China, right? And for that, recently, Bakamla is also being asked by our leadership to do the risk mitigation directly with China as well, right? So I understand that in January, there's a leadership meeting between the head of Bakamla and then the head of the Chinese Coast Guard to reduce risk and, I don't know, maybe set up guardrail behavior. So what do you think of this initiative? Where does that lead? And how do you balance the risk reduction initiative between the ASEAN-based one and this bilateral that Indonesia is doing with China? How do we balance that?
So maybe I get the panelists to answer the questions first regarding the structure of the Coast Guards and how you can cooperate with each other, and then the funding issue for the boats, followed by Park for the questions from CSIS.
Okay, the progress of the ASEF, I think I have mentioned earlier, some of it is the incoming technical expert group meeting that will be done in Bogor next week, and I'm supposed to be there to open the meeting. The progress, we are finalizing the term of reference and concept paper. So with the presence of all 10 ASEAN member states in that meeting, I think it will help a lot, right, to get the consensus sooner, right? And the ASEAN Secretariat is actually, I personally I have met the people from the ASEAN Secretariat here in Manila. It was in 2022, so it was after the first the inauguration meeting in Bali, the ASEF, and then I was here. I was tasked by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Indonesia to report the result of the first meeting of ACF in Manila, in the ASEAN Maritime Forum and extended ASEAN Maritime Forum at that time. And actually, I was surprised when I report that, then the Secretary of ASEAN was already pushing us to accelerate the process in making the ASEAN Coast Guard Forum to be a formalized technical group of ASEAN. Right? So if the TOR or the concept paper can be finalized, then we will submit that to the ASEAN Secretariat. Our government, especially the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, they support us fully in this. I think the acceleration that we can get domestically is because of the full support that we receive from our Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And for Pak Karisma, the bilateral meeting between Indonesian Coast Guard and the China Coast Guard actually is not, I may say, not planned after the new administration. It has been done 2 years ago. We've met with the Chinese Coast Guard delegation during the Vietnam Coast Guard and Friend event in Hanoi, and at the time both sides agreed that we would like to have a Coast Guard to Coast Guard talk or Coast Guard to Coast Guard dialogue, and we consult our foreign affairs ministries and Bakamla itself. We believe that we need to have a channel with them, so we can, even though maybe there's some difference at sea that we may find, but if we have, the proper channel, we can. We believe that it will also help us to lower the risk. Right? So, so the meeting with the China Coast Guard was followed by the MOU, and the MOU is quite general. Both sides agreed to work, but in not in sensitive field, information sharing and things like that. I think I'll stop there. Thank you.
Colonel, you want to address the queries from the bond earlier on regarding the funding and also the cooperations between the different Coast Guard, because different Coast Guard are under the different ministry in the individual countries.
Yeah, I think that the cooperation among ASEAN Coast Guard now is not enough. I think that only, for Vietnam Coast Guard, for example, we just have, some joint patrol, sharing information, and sign some MOU for the visit, for example, exchange of the visits. And I think that's not enough for the Coast Guard of ASEAN. And one of the things you mentioned is about one of the challenge, I think very important, is the different structure or different, administrative institution of the Coast Guard. In some countries, the Coast Guard is under the Ministry of Defense, and the other is under the Ministry of Security, and sometimes in combined agencies. This is also has the impact, on the administrative procedure, the command system, and also the decision making. So if you want to do something, you have to wait for a long time, So that is also the big problem for among ASEAN Coast Guard to be resolved in the future. If you want to strengthen the cooperation, among ASEAN Coast Guard. And for Vietnam and China, we now, apart from the cooperation with ASEAN Coast Guard, we also have a very close cooperation with China Coast Guard, especially for the joint patrol in the Gulf of Tonkin. We have done it, annually, every year, and also bring the result, good for the maintaining the security in the, at sea.
Commodore J, what's your observations based on the questions raised earlier?
Well, before the ASEAN Coast Guard Forum was even conceptualized, it actually started as what Admiral Samuel can still recall. It started with the Gulf of Thailand initiative. It's basically coming from GOTI. And then Southeast Asian maritime law enforcement agencies realized, why don't we widen the scope of GOTI and then come up with ASEAN Coast Guard Forum? During the initial stages of the ASEAN Coast Guard Forum, some of ASEAN countries were even complaining they cannot join the ASEAN Coast Guard Forum because not all ASEAN countries have Coast Guard. Like, for example, Laos, Cambodia, Myanmar, and even Singapore does not have Coast Guard, but they have police Coast Guard. The only Coast Guard organizations that are really prominent in the entire Southeast Asia is actually Indonesia, Malaysia, Vietnam, and the Philippines. And then there was also an issue about, as what you said, for example, Indonesian Bakamla is actually headed by an active naval officer, unlike with MMEA and that of the Vietnam Coast Guard and the Philippine Coast Guard. But all of this are already behind us all now. Most of the ASEAN, as long as you are a maritime law enforcement agency, and even if you're just patrolling Mekong River, you are still going to be part of the ASEAN Coast Guard Forum. We come up already with an understanding that it should be something that is different from that of the Navy. So that is the ASEAN Coast Guard Forum now moving forward. The question for the acquisition of Coast Guard vessels. When the Philippine Coast Guard was separated in 1998, that was actually a good opportunity for the Philippine government because we received an ODA coming from that of the Japanese government. Through JICA, ODA, that time, because of the peace constitution of the Japanese government, cannot be used for military support to other countries. In 1998, the first Coast Guard vessel that was given to us by the Japanese government is now a buoy tender that we still use. So that's the first one. And then in 2012 or 2013, a year after the standoff, when President Noynoy Aquino came to visit Prime Minister Abe, that was the first time that the ODA was used for acquisition of Coast Guard vessels for the Philippines. And then that was also the same template that was used by Vietnam in asking for the support of Japan, and even for MMEA to receive the refurbished vessel of the Japanese Coast Guard. I don't think that because of the Coast Guard being separated from that of the Navy gave us troubles in acquiring more assets because we lessened the defense budget and cutting additional pie for that of the Coast Guard. The cooperation of middle powers like Japan, Australia, and South Korea allowed Southeast Asian countries to come up with a different approach, whether ODA, grants, or soft loans, to have more Coast Guard vessel capability in the previous years. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we have a bit of a shortage of time, but I will try to allow you to raise questions first, then I will move to your side. So keep the questions short and simple, just one question per se. Supriyanto, and followed by Professor Titinan. Okay.
Thank you. Question to Commodore Terriella. I would like to relate this panel's topic to the previous topic about maritime transparency, right? I think it's very important for ASEAN Coast Guards to cooperate to promote maritime transparency. I think the problem is not the lack of transparency among other ASEAN countries. I think the difference is in the tactics of transparency. I remember late last year, Bakamla also had a skirmish with the Chinese Coast Guard as well, and I think it's also been mentioned that the MMEA also publicized a lot about the encounters with China over the Luconia shoals. So what do you think the other Coast Guards in ASEAN can do to promote maritime transparency? And perhaps as a corollary to that, and I understand that last year the ASEAN Coast Guard Forum also proposed common protocols for engagements at sea, right? So how do you think this initiative can also contribute to promoting that transparency? Thank you.
I think we follow to Dr. Titinan.
The role of the Coast Guard, the role and the function, and also the objectives seem to have changed and been transformed over time. So it's not just about safety and marine environment anymore, right? So the Chinese Coast Guard, for example, is a force unto itself. It's another force in the using gray zone tactics and so on. So I have a quick question for the Commodore. If you look at the Philippines trying to securitize the West Philippine Sea, and you look at Philippines being the frontline state in this case, but also at the same time, on the flip side, an outlier state in a sense it's confronting, standing up to China without ASEAN support. So you're looking for ASEAN support. In the Coast Guard space, it's very disparate and divergent. So you mentioned yourself, Commodore, that most countries don't even have proper Coast Guard. Right? So Thailand has a long sea coast, doesn't have a proper Coast Guard. So would you consider, would it behoove the Philippines to consider other ways of getting support from ASEAN, like, and I'm thinking of not coalition of willing, but ASEAN willing, ASEAN states willing, like-minded in one way. Another way would be a mini-lateral that you already have with other Coast Guard, Japan, Australia, and with like-minded ASEAN Coast Guard units. But bear in mind that, the Vietnam we just heard, and even Indonesia, Philippines might be still an outlier because the other countries have relationships, good relations with China. So this is a case that if you want to get more support from ASEAN, it might have to be less than the whole, and it might have to be discerning and selective, and also it also would behoove the Philippines. Being here, I can see that this is everything. This is front and center. This is existential, clear and present. But if the Philippines pay more attention to other issues that matter to other ASEAN countries that you're trying to get support from, say Myanmar or Mekong, then they might pay more attention to the South China Sea, West Philippine Sea.
Commodore, I think you are the target of all the questions.
Well, first of all, October 2024 was actually a very interesting date last year. It's because that's the time that the Vietnamese government publicized the harassment of their fishermen by the Chinese Coast Guard. And that was also the same month that Bakamla publicized that they were able to drive away the presence of China Coast Guard in Natuna Island. But for MMEA, for the first time, that was Prime Minister Anwar was asked about the presence of the Chinese Coast Guard in Lacuna Shoals. And he said firmly that Malaysian government, despite of the Chinese presence, will still pursue the oil exploration. This was very important for me because this was actually the turning point of Southeast Asian countries for the first time choosing to publicize the violation of the Chinese Coast Guard within their own exclusive economic zone. If your question is, how can we be able to sustain this? I asked this during the opening dinner, as you can probably remember, even on the second day, how can we be able to compel or convince Malaysia, Indonesia, and Vietnam to constantly expose Chinese aggression in their respective exclusive economic zone? Sometimes, because of the silence of our Southeast Asian neighbors, the international community often think that it's only the Philippines who is experiencing the aggressive response and provocative actions of the People's Republic of China. But among us, operators in the South China Sea, we know for a fact that in Lacuna Shoals, more than 350 days, the China Coast Guard remains to be there. In Natuna Island, China Coast Guard, as we speak right now, are also encroaching that area, and even for Vietnam. But That's our objective of transparency. We need to tell the world that China is also violating your own exclusive economic zone, that this is not freedom of navigation. But I don't have a right answer for you. How can we be able to sustain this kind of transparency? But as far as this government is concerned, that is our end goal. That is our objective, to make the region understand that exposing Chinese aggression is not actually provocative. Regarding the question of Professor Titinan, how can we be able to get the support of Southeast Asia, whether in doing minilaterals or engaging through ASEAN Coast Guard Forum or whatever means that is necessary for us to at least convince the continental Southeast Asia, as what Professor Titinan mentioned, through Laos, Cambodia, Myanmar, and even Thailand. Probably we can talk about Mekong River. We can probably talk about the Rohingya in Myanmar. But again, as a Coast Guard officer, Professor, I can only make recommendation, and with a very limited network that I can influence in our government. It's actually probably something that is missing for our diplomatic engagement with these countries. I don't think that the Philippine government failed to look into the interests of each Southeast Asian countries. Probably we need more extra efforts to have a unified Southeast Asia to support our position and to expose Chinese aggression. But honestly, I still don't have the answer.
I think thank you very much for the answers. I think we have run out of time. I think there's many other interested panelists that want to ask questions, but because of the time constraints, we have to end these panels now. So I would like to thank the panelists for giving frank and open discussions and perspective. I'm formerly from a uniformed service too, so I wish you all the best of luck in your future endeavors and the best of luck for the various Coast Guards and Defense Forces. Thank you very much.
Just mine. Once again, let's give them a round of applause. And to our panelists, please stay on stage for a photo opportunity.
Right after them, di ba?
Yes, pa. Thank you to our final group of speakers. And before we end this dialogue, may we call on Mr. Richard Haydarian for SAM recap. Let's give him a round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you. I think you have heard more than me, and we have the Friday traffic, and some of you are trying to catch up, so I'll try to keep this as quick as possible. I'm sure we can lay out the full summary of all of the panel discussions throughout the past 2 days and so to everyone. Let me just first of all say that I think we have to be honest with ourselves. It came out in a lot of our discussion that there is a degree of, or at least a sensibility of strategic solitude perhaps sometimes by the Philippines, or perception that the Philippines is the only country perhaps in the region that is proactively exposing certain activities by at least one of the major powers in this part of the world. And that's why it's very important for us to also highlight that we have to guard ourselves against what I call strategic gaslighting, that sometimes the very countries that try to stand up for their basic rights are the countries that are being blamed for provocation. So I think it was important, at least in this panel, for respective representatives of the Philippines and experts from this country to lay out their case to the rest of the region and also to the rest of the world. But more importantly, this is not about just what the Philippines does, it's what the Philippines can learn from and what the Philippines can exchange with the rest of the region. I think a lot of frustration for some of us from the Philippines is that we have much more conversation with our counterparts in Europe, Japan, and the United States than some of our friends in the ASEAN, and sometimes it's vice versa. So closing that gap has been always extremely important, and closing that gap is much more possible if we recognize the kind of shared interest that we have. And speaking of shared interests, it's also a question of how do you operationalize that shared interest and how do you work on that shared interest. I keep on hearing about what is the end goal here, what is the end point here. I think Henry Kissinger said something very smart and something quite dreary and gloomy. He said something like, every solution to every problem is a ticket to your next problem. Right? So as far as the South China Sea is concerned, maritime security is concerned, I think whatever we're doing in the next 5 to 10 years is just going to hopefully prepare us or mitigate something worse happening in the next 5 to 10 years. And then hopefully we can continue this kind of dialogue so that we can have this constant dialectical interaction and at the same time coping and hopefully some sort of resolution from point to point as we deal with what I think a lot of us can accept as an intergenerational challenge. Now, I think it has been very much clear from the very first day that one of the things that we all share as ASEAN countries is this concept of strategic agency. And there's nothing more insulting to any ASEAN country than to be dismissed as nothing but a puppet of a superpower or an extension of another major power's, essentially, whims. And I think it has been very important for all of us, not only in the Philippines, but in the rest of the ASEAN region, to emphasize that point. Strategic autonomy, right? Strategic agency. That's something very important. And speaking of strategic autonomy and strategic agency, the way we can exercise that in a converged and synchronized manner is if we look at things that we share together and things that bring us together. During the first panel, for instance, we discussed yesterday that if you look at it, UNCLOS is something we can all agree upon, right? Because UNCLOS is the constitution for the oceans, as one of the speakers mentioned, Freddie mentioned in our very first panel. And in UNCLOS, all of us can find the best instrument to protect our interests, right? Because the alternative to UNCLOS is the rule of the jungle. And that's why it's not only about the rules-based international order, but an UNCLOS-based order, as far as our part of the world is concerned. This is also about our shared roles as custodians. As Dr. Xiaoping Wu mentioned yesterday, we are custodians of nearly half of the world's coral species. But what's important here is not only the scientific data, but how you marry that scientific data with an understanding of the nuances of diplomacy and statecraft. And that's never going to be easy. And that's why it's extremely important for us, scientists and social scientists and policymakers, to talk, to learn from each other, and find that kind of nuance point whereby policy can marry science so that we can be more effective in being custodians of such immense biodiversity in our part of the world. There have been also discussions about concrete mechanisms to move forward, for instance, in operationalizing our shared interest in terms of maritime security. For instance, in the multiple panels, there were calls, for instance, for an urgent multi-pronged approach, sustainable fishery practices, habitat restorations, marine aquaculture, technological innovation, and greater public awareness. These were measures that we deemed as vital to protection of our food and human security in this part of the world. Lastly, I want to also emphasize that we really tried to look at ways whereby our different relevant agencies, Coast Guard or similar agencies, can work together. And the reality is this. I think most of us, practically all of us, are post-colonial nations. We're still building our capabilities. But what I can say from the story of the Philippines, and I'm very thankful to the research of some of our good friends like Colin Ko, is that if you just look at a lot of us just 5 or 10 years ago, we had extremely limited capabilities, right? Whether it's in terms of Coast Guard capability, whether it's an ability of hosting an event like this, whether it's an ability of articulating even our basic interests and distinguishing ourselves from great power competition. So for me, what gives me hope moving forward is how far we have come in the past 5 to 10 years. I don't think we're here to say that the Philippines is setting the gold standard with our transparency initiative or the development of our Coast Guard. But what I believe is that if you look at different countries in this part of the world, the kind of conversations we can have among policymakers and among experts here, and the kind of visions that we're laying out here, perhaps we may not have the gold standard yet, but I think we may have an idea of what kind of gold standard we want to share as a region in the years to come. So on that positive note, because I don't want to talk more, I think I have more than 5 minutes, there's an important announcement to be made, because we just hope, as the Chinese saying goes, we just hope that this is the first step in a journey of 1,000 miles. So this is going to be a long game and a long conversation, and very much encouraged by the depth and the sincerity of conversations we have had in the past 3 days. Thank you very much.
want to thank everyone for joining. I'd like to express our gratitude on behalf of our team at WPS, especially those who traveled from the other 9 ASEAN member states. We truly value your or our candid conversations over the past 2.5 days. Our vision for this dialogue is to keep this going, make this an annual Track 1.5 process, and to serve as a platform for the expression of, as what Richard emphasized a while ago, ASEAN member states' strategic autonomy and agency. So this will not stay in Manila. We hope to bring the dialogue on ASEAN maritime security in another ASEAN city next year. So hope to see you all there, maybe in Kuala Lumpur, maybe in Bangkok, or maybe in Jakarta. So, and as I've also said before, the dialogue on ASEAN maritime security is serving as a Sherpa to the Manila dialogue on the South China Sea, which is a bigger Track 1.5 process involving not just ASEAN states, but also other key stakeholders like the United States, China, Australia, European partners, India, and many others. That will be on November 5 to 7 here in Manila. So hope to see many of you there. Thank you so much.